Hello, welcome back to BSLIVE. Today I'll be checking out this Blender 2.91 Alpha new features, mesh to volume and volume to mesh. So this is kind of like I call this like a volumetric creatures. It's pretty abstract and it's actually something that you can create pretty easily. I don't use any kind of nodes, trick or whatever, but it's just like a volume. Imagine like a cloud or like a smoke. You look at the smoke over time, it grows and it creates all kind of shapes, and you think, okay, it looks like a characters, like a creatures, right? So I call this like a volumetric creatures. So this is actually very easy to set up. So I will start again from scratch. And so far it's running pretty stable while I'm not recording. I'm running this on my Mac, so it's definitely slowing down. So Blender 2.91 Alpha, this was released few days ago, still alpha, so it might crash. So I'll start with just a simple mesh, like a donut or like a torus. Okay, I like to use torus because it has this hole, and when we are doing displacement, etc., it's gonna create more interesting shapes. So a torus, and I want to convert this into a volume. So let me start this by typing like a mesh original, and we want to convert it into volume. There are actually really good tutorials talking about volumetric, I think by default Cube YouTube channel, Blender YouTube channel. Basically you want to create a volume, an empty volume object, and you want to convert this donut into a volume. Later on we're gonna volume displace it. Okay, so for now it's mesh to volume, and we're gonna select our mesh original. Okay, so now you can see the volume, and you can play around with this, increase the volume, the voxel amount for more details. I just pick 64 for now. So you can already starting to play around. Let me save this again by, oops, I haven't saved it. Okay, volumetric creature. The next thing we want to do is to use volume displays, and with volume displays, so we already have like a starting volume geometry, so we want to displace it into random shapes. Gonna create new. By default it's gonna push it somewhere. We're gonna be using a texture, so we're gonna jump into the texture. So by default it's this texture. We can use clouds or marble, maybe musgrave even. Cloud maybe for start, and we can play around with the size. We can get something really detailed and wispy, or something large with a large displacement also here with the strength. So you can have interesting shapes, and then the shapes the volume start to leak into another voxel area, so you get these interesting cloud shapes. And of course the fastest and the easiest way is to have some kind of empty to control the displacement, as you're already familiar with the displace modifier. So this is we can call it volume displace control. Okay, so we started to have some kind of random volume shapes. We can hide mesh original. So by default the volume objects will tend to stay where the mesh origin is. So we can already start to see something. This is actually already pretty cool. It's like a cloud, and we can move the controller around to have different shapes. Now let's create an object like a default cube and just call it mesh final. This is for our creature or whatever abstract things that we're gonna create. We're gonna add a volume to mesh modifier. We're gonna turn the volume back into mesh, because You might wonder why you want to turn mesh objects into volume into mesh again, because it's almost like turning it into a fluid, and you are free to mess around with the fluid voxel, and then you turn it back into mesh. So it's almost like having the water like water power or something. So yeah, let's grab our volume object. Suddenly we have mesh. You can see it's very abstract, and yeah, and it's picking up the density of the volume. We have all this kind of options. For now, I'm just gonna leave it like that. You can use adaptive to make it more adaptive to the shape, more resolutions near, more details where it's needed. And the next thing I want to do is to use mirror. So it's very cool. Suddenly we can mirror this volume data and maybe turn on bisect. If you want something that's really abstract, you can turn it on in all three different axes. Sometimes you get quite an interesting result, but I like to keep it simple. For now, just doing it in x-axis. You can always flip it to have, like a male, female thing, or, if you can blend the X, that's maybe even more interesting. So anyway, volume, we can hide the volume now. We can still play around with the shapes. In fact, you can add some things like, you can further displace the shapes, and you can also turn on voxel remaster to get something that's a little bit better in terms of topology. So currently it's very messy because we also with our mesh final turn on adaptives too strong, so maybe okay, keep it simple for now. And then you can, like I said, you can use remesh, voxel remesher, so you can see it's so much nicer now. You can actually sculpt this after the fact. If you find a shape that kind of interesting, you think, okay, that resembles some kind of creature or mask, something. I found it to be really interesting. I mean, in the background, of course, the volume is changing based on the displacement that we provided, So this texture objects, whenever we make a jump, okay, we have cloud now, right? We can change the size of the cloud. It's gonna affect the shape, of course. This is Blender original noise, type of soft. You can change the type to hard. So this looks like snail. Yeah, it's interesting to see the dynamics of the volume, how it's reacting to the texture displacement. Remember that this is originally, of course, the donuts, and you can tweak and shape and twist the donut shape before it becomes volume, before it's become a mesh again. So feel free to play around with it. Musgrave, Voronoi, can give all kind of really wild shape to make your creature. Oh, no, sometimes it does resemble a character or face. Not always. Play around with the scale, also the scale of the texture, by modifying the controller. So I play around with these mirror ideas quite often. So with Blender 2.1 Alpha, Sphere Chalk add-on does not work yet. So I cannot make like random shapes yet using nodes, but it will be updated. So this is actually more like a face of some sort. So mesh final, mesh original, back to the volume. This is multifractal. Interesting. I thought I was using different one. Okay, I'm using Musgrave, but Musgrave also have different option. But maybe stick with the cloud for now. And pick this all kind of variations. Cell noise. Maybe cell noise can give you some interesting shapes. For some things to look like a creature with, you might need to have arms and legs shape. With the donut shape, you tend to end up with a face. If you want, I have another idea. So start with something like a circle. Circle, yeah. Skin modifier. So it's now skin unmeshed. You can subdivide it, but you can also displace the skin. So displace, subdivide it. I mean, use a texture and go really wild with the strength. And put the displacement before the skin. So maybe, so now, if with the donut shape you have like a circle, right? But maybe if you have like an X shape, then you're gonna have something that looks like more like arm and legs. If we actually, with the skin modifier, we can just add points like that, like a spider. So the volume can react to this. Let's see. Yeah. Maybe we can even use the objects, our volume displace controller, and let this also displace the volume and also these objects over here. So if we go back to volume, we're gonna, instead of using mesh original, we use this mesh circle. Volume, use the mesh circle, and suddenly we have something completely different. And turn off our mesh circle, turn off X-ray, something pretty wild there. Move our controller to the side. So we're gonna have this X shape. The scale will affect the volume. And also don't forget, with the volume, you can go higher with the voxel amount. It's gonna give us more detail, and then with the mesh final, we can also turn up the voxel amount, or actually just grid should work most of the time. Threshold, we can maybe make this smaller threshold to get the volume to fill the in-between. I don't know, maybe it's not too slow. Okay, we have something that's now more, it resembles kind of like a robot. And I believe you can also mix and match the volume at some point, so you can add a volume into original volume. Let's see if I can increase this. See, I can increase the volume band. So the limbs and the legs now connected. The density, okay, I haven't played around much with the density. Okay, now it's looking pretty cool. And the mirror, like I said, the mirror can have flip side. You can actually use the flip side. Maybe in fact I should use both. So I'm going to duplicate this guy. So same object, the other one is going to be flipped. And I'm gonna give it a different color. So we are seeing both. And on top of this weirdness, we can also we can use the other guy that we created earlier. We're gonna need 2 volume object, however, so cancel that, cancel this. Just some ideas. You might use multiple volume objects and experiment with the result. So whenever you go out and you see the cloud moving around, you can use your imaginations and think of creatures. You can do the same thing inside Blender. And volume, let's go back. So mesh circle, mesh original, which is our donuts. And this guy is more like a head. The voxel is so much more detailed now, so it's slower. Turn this back to 64. So you might even come up with some kind of design idea, so it's not just like for character, it can be anything. Anything that's functional, more or less. So form before functions. Back to the volume, displacement. Still, maybe I need to play around more with this noise. Simple radius. Increase the strength. Big number. If the volume displacement is too big, the voxels tend to leak into big areas, so it's becoming really slow. So let's go to mesh final, turn off remesh. Active threshold 0.01. This is the donut, right? It's being displaced by our volume. So it seems like we don't have much of strength to displace it nicely. And my mouse keeps disappearing. It happens with the Blender Alpha. So anyway, mesh original, you can forget it. Go back to our character. Option G, Option R, Option S. There you go. It's basically a shape, a simple outline shapes that you can displace, and because this is volumetric and it's displacing the shape a little bit more. That's why we have this kind of things going on. Like I said, why do we bother turning mesh into volume? Because we can do this. We can add these weird details, and then as we go smaller and smaller, we get all kind of random shapes. I think we can go a little bit wider, like wilder with this. Okay, but anyway, it seems to be doing this. I lost my mouse, so I think I will stop here. I can give you the blend files. You can experiment with it. Try using different kind of 3D texture displacement in Blender. You might come out with something interesting. So thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.